This is BBC News. We'll have the headlines for you at the top of the hour, which is straight after this programme.
Hello everybody, welcome to Talking Business Weekly with me, Mark Lobel. Let's take a look at what's on the show. The mounting cost of war. For how much longer can Ukraine afford to carry on fighting Russia? A stop to US military aid is adding to the financial strains. The government is already spending more than half its cash on defence. So how reliant is it on foreign help? I'm going to be discussing all of this with this former economic advisor to President Zelensky, who will explain how Ukraine's government is managing its way through the economic challenges caused by 3 years of war. And I sit down with the boss of one of Ukraine's biggest companies to hear how he's kept it going and what role the private sector will have to play in rebuilding the country. Plus, the big bucks in beauty. The boss of hairstyling giant GHD tells me how new technology is changing the way millions of us take care of our hair. Wherever you're joining me from around the world, hello and welcome to the show. The war in Ukraine continues to change so much about the global economy. That ranges from how much of your taxes are being spent on defence to the cost of energy and even how companies get hold of raw materials for everything from food to consumer goods. However, inside Ukraine, 3 years of war have left thousands of people dead or injured, and for many more, homes and jobs have been upended. As the fighting on the front line continues, it is the damage to Ukraine's battered economy that is setting the scene for so much else. Put simply, the war against Russia is becoming increasingly unaffordable, and a lot of the diplomatic struggles revolve around who is and isn't prepared to pay for it. For Ukraine, the big picture is that the economy is still smaller than it was before Russia's invasion in 2022 and is worth about $184 billion. And that's even though the central bank thinks it grew 3.4% last year, despite the impact of the war. There's been huge damage to much of the infrastructure that any economy relies on, and which supported Ukraine's hugely important agricultural exports. Before the war, Ukraine grew enough food to feed 400 million people around the world, but much of the land that was used is now contaminated with mines and other unexploded munitions. Ukraine's exports, which also include lots of metals and minerals, last year recovered to reach about $41 billion. However, that's still around 40% down on pre-war levels. It means less money coming into the country at a time when 56% of government spending, or $67 billion, is going on defence and security. The strains that is causing means a range of taxes have gone up recently, including on wages, alcohol and tobacco, as well as on bank profits. Those increases are vital to getting help from the international community. These financial strains are why Ukraine has been so dependent on foreign help to fund its war effort. And it's why the US suspension of military aid is likely to have a huge impact. The US has been the biggest donor, and its Defense Department says its military aid amounts to more than $180 billion since the war began. President Trump is hoping to get some of that back through a deal centered on Ukraine's natural resources.
We want to be able also to spend money on other things. We don't want to. This is a tremendous amount of money, and what the Biden administration did was terrible. They were giving money, but he had no security on the money. Europe, as you know, gave much less money, but they had security. It was in the form of a loan. They get their money back, and we didn't. And now, at least we're protected because the American taxpayer has to be protected too. But this is an incredible agreement for Ukraine because we have a big investment in their country now.
Since his dramatic bust-up at the White House with Donald Trump, President Zelensky has been trying to stress his country's gratitude for the support it's had.
There will be diplomacy for the sake of peace and for the sake of our unity. Ukraine, Europe, and definitely America. Surely we understand the importance of America, and we are grateful for all the support we received from the United States of America.
And it seems there will be lots more help coming from Ukraine's European neighbours too.
Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilise close to 800 billion euros of defence expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe. We will, of course, continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
So, will Ukraine still have enough foreign help to get by after the immense damage 3 years of war has done to its economy? I've been catching up with a man who until December was an economic advisor to President Zelensky, something he's now doing on an informal basis. Alexander Rodnyansky, welcome to the programme. I want to begin by asking you this. How would you describe the damage 3 years of war has inflicted on Ukraine's economy?
Well, thank you for having me. The damage, of course, is serious. It's severe. It's seen all around the economy, primarily to the infrastructure, the housing stock, just the service sector as well, many areas of the economy. We can see and look at the numbers. We know that Ukraine's GDP in 2022 collapsed by around 1/4, 25%, 23%. Then we saw a modest recovery over the years that came after 2003, 2024. But in 2025, we expect even lower growth, although positive. So in general, this is very far from fully recovering, if you want. And in general, the economy is, of course, under heavy strain.
A key part of the economy, a big earner for Ukraine, traditionally are exports. Can you underline how important they are as part of the economy and what has to happen for them to recover to pre-war levels?
That's right. So exports obviously are an important part to Ukraine's economy, have always been. Our share of exports to GDP is actually quite high. It used to be almost 50% back in the day, about 10 years ago. Then it slowly sank, and right now it's about a fourth, so it's 26% of GDP. And about 60% of those exports are agricultural goods. Ukraine is famous for the wheat, the crop, the sunflower oil and seeds, etc. So exports have actually gone down initially as the overall economy, but they've recovered somewhat and they continue to recover. Now, what the prospects are is actually difficult to say depending on what awaits us in the international setting when it comes to tariffs and trade policy.
When it comes to the politics, the US has paused military aid, but Europe says it will spend more. So how vital is foreign funding to Ukraine for its ability to carry on fighting Russia?
It's vital, it's key. As you know, our budget essentially is half financed, 50% financed through donations and through the support of our partners, 50% through our local taxes that we raise. Now that percentage has shifted somewhat in favor of Ukraine's taxation base more recently, but it hasn't shifted much. Now, if that were to fall away, clearly that would be a deep crisis that would be happening in Ukraine. We would face enormous challenges in terms of not just stabilizing our economy, but also fighting the enemy and stabilizing the front line at the very least. So in that sense, it's vital. Support that we're receiving from our partners is essential for our survival.
Your government says it wants to make the economy less reliant on raw materials, yet there's talk of a $500 billion minerals deal with the United States. Are the numbers being talked about realistic?
Yes, that's a good question. I don't think they're entirely realistic at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty, at the very least, attached to these numbers. And in general, I find some of these discussions somewhat bemusing, to put it that way, because lots of these raw materials, the rare earth metals that everybody now talks about, haven't really been explored in Ukraine yet. They haven't been developed there. We're not really producing them at this point. Now, there's old data, even from the Soviet era, that suggests that we're rich in these raw materials. But again, this is all estimates. So there would be a lot of preparatory work that would have to be done. So I think this is a very long journey. When I hear these numbers of about 500 billion or more or less, I think they're sort of taken out of thin air or not very well justified, but it remains to be seen.
When you hear these numbers as part of a deal, what are the two sides on about?
Well, that's kind of my feeling as well, just as you put it. I'm not quite sure what they're on about, and Trump is obviously using it for his own political purposes or advantages. For Ukraine, ideally, in the best case scenario, to have big international conglomerates present in Ukraine and to share their knowledge and expertise and to help develop the country and create jobs, that's always positive for the economy. But we are very far away from that.
The cost of reconstruction and recovery is estimated to be $524 billion, roughly 2.8 times the size of Ukraine's economy. So where's all that money going to come from?
That's a good question. It would obviously have to come over the years, and it's not something that would happen instantaneously. And it would be our main partners and donors, as mentioned before, so the EU, the US, potentially also international organizations, the IMF, the World Bank. But again, you have to remember the lion's share of these regions are actually in the occupied territories now. So if we are talking about the future recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine proper, so to say, that is not occupied, then these numbers are potentially or certainly a lot smaller.
Alexander, the last few months we've seen taxes go up on everything from wages to alcohol and even on bank profits to fund the war effort. How much longer can Ukraine afford to fight this war?
Well, I certainly can't give you an exact date after which Ukraine won't be able to afford to fight the war. There's many factors that play into this. But clearly we are strained in terms of our budget and our financing constraints. And that's the reason why the government is actually resorting to these contractionary measures that would usually be bad for the economy, bad for economic growth, just to increase the tax revenue that they're collecting, even without necessarily increasing the tax base. So that's a measure that's necessary right now, that there's no way around it. The rest comes from international help and international partners.
From an economic point of view, how critical is the situation?
The situation is critical, no doubt, but we have some certainty when it comes to the short-term budgeting and financial commitments that we are receiving. So for the year of 2025, we are hoping that we will have enough money in our treasury. Now, what happens afterwards in a sort of medium run, that really depends on the dynamic at the front line, on the other commitments that we hope to receive from our donors and partners. Should we require them, and we probably will if there's going to be war or if the war is not going to end. So that is much harder to say at this point and make those projections.
Alexander Rodnyansky, thank you so much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
What about the role of private business in Ukraine? How resilient has it been, and what is its role in keeping the economy going through war? The metals and mining giant Metinvest is one of Ukraine's biggest companies, and I caught up with its CEO whilst he was here in London. Yuriy Ryzhenkov, welcome to the programme. I wanted to start by asking you, what are the biggest challenges in keeping businesses going after 3 years of war?
Well, the biggest challenge, as always, is to keep up the morale of the people. They believe that we can pull through, that whatever they're doing is not a lost cause, and that we still can defend our country and we still can defend our people.
How have your production and export levels changed, having gone through 3 years of war, compared to what they were like before?
Well, we lost approximately 40% of the company since the beginning of this full-scale invasion in 2022. Mainly, we lost Mariupol, where we had two largest steel-making factories in Ukraine, which is Azovstal and Ilyich plant, and that was a big hit for the company. Then we also had a disruption in logistics, so we could not use the logistics through the Black Sea ports, and we could not deliver our products to our customers, even from the facilities that are still operational. Fortunately, during mainly 2023 and 24, the logistics through the Black Sea ports has been restored, so now we're supplying our customers in the Far East, we're supplying our customers in Europe with our materials. So right now we're pretty much running at the limit of available capacity.
Last year, Ukraine's economy grew slower because of Russia's attacks, diminishing demand from abroad and power problems. How has all of that affected the private sector?
It was a very difficult year. It was a very difficult year, especially with the disruptions in the power supplies. Also, those disruptions, they meant that electricity prices were unpredictable in Ukraine, so we had to adjust our operations, shutting down the less energy efficient operations and trying to make sure that we're still in the green in terms of our profitability. And that was a big challenge for our technical people down at the factories, down at the mills, to make sure that on one hand you continue producing, on the other hand chances for disasters are minimized.
And for Ukraine, exports of iron, coal and sunflower oil are so crucial to keeping the economy afloat. How are those sectors doing at the moment? What challenges are they facing right now?
I think each of those sectors has their own challenges. When we're talking about the iron ore production, then the main challenge is that the electricity tariffs are not predictable and they're relatively high, and that means that not all the operations can continue as pre-war levels. Like one of our mining facilities has been idled in the middle of last year and still idle right now. When we're talking about a steel-making facilities, then the problem is that without security guarantees, without some sort of security surety for Ukraine, we cannot invest. And steel industry is an industry where you have to invest continuously. You cannot stop. If you don't invest, then you cannot develop, then you cannot run at full capacity. And that's the problem for the steel sector at the moment. I'm not that much into sunflower oil, but as far as I know, there are problems there as well, mainly related to the landmines that are at the fields, and also the problem that there is a big chunk of the fertile lands that have been lost during this invasion that have been occupied by the Russians.
You're one of Ukraine's largest employers. You have staff who've been killed. You have staff who are serving on the front line. How do you manage and protect them?
From the very beginning, we made it very personal to the management, to the company, to know where our people are and how we can help them. So now we know where all of our more than 8,000 people are stationed throughout the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Whenever they need any support in terms of equipment, in terms of outfitting, we'll always help them. And we are trying to be also very veteran-friendly organization, because we understand that first our employees will come back home and we need to welcome them back into the society, into the company. Also we would like to be an employer of choice for other veterans that will be coming from this war. And for that thing, we have all sorts of programs. We have the psychological support, we have the physical support, help their families, but also welcome them back into the company, welcome them back into their teams once this war is over.
The private sector is helping to fund part of the fighting, including your company's owner, Rinat Akhmetov. How challenging is spending money on the front line as well as keeping a business afloat?
Well, I think one goes with the other. If you don't have the business afloat, then you cannot spend the money on the front line. In fact, as far as I know, the Rinat Akhmetov is the largest private contributor to the Ukrainian defense efforts. We're not saying that he is spending money to buy arms or explosives or whatever, but he spends a lot of money to help fortify Ukrainian army's position, help to outfit them, help with the armored plates and humanitarian aid, like the medical supplies, like the food, water, shelter, and so on and so forth. I think to him it's a personal commitment to the country. It's a personal commitment to winning. And in this respect, I don't really think he does, and neither does the management think that it's or else, right? So you don't have any choice. You have to both run the business and to help the country.
America, in Donald Trump's words, wants to get its money back with access to Ukraine's minerals and natural resources. It's a question everybody's asking, and I want to ask you, Yuriy, do Ukraine's rare earth elements exist in a meaningful enough way, in quantity and in accessibility, to placate the US's demands?
I'm not a specialist in the rare earths elements, so anything I say about it would be speculation. I really don't want to speculate, but I'm pretty sure that Ukraine is rich of several natural resources. As Metinvest, as a big employer, as a big business in Ukraine, we would welcome more and more foreign investment, foreign players to come into our country and to develop those resources.
So you'd welcome it. It would also have an added security element as well.
Well, I'm not sure about security. Again, as I said, I'm not a specialist in international diplomacy or politics, but the more you have open and transparent businesses in the country which are paying taxes and which are providing good employment, good development of the people, the better it is.
Do you get the sense that they're in the occupied East, these
I'm sorry, that would be a speculation. I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea.
And do you understand the logic of what the Americans are suggesting? And do you think it's something that the Ukrainians should provide if possible?
Well, again, it's difficult to comment on that because we don't really have the full array of information to make our conclusions.
And if the Americans are looking at Ukraine's minerals and natural resources. Are there other areas that they could be looking at that you think are ripe for investment in Ukraine?
In my view, there are lots of opportunities for investment in Ukraine, and it's not only minerals. It's also like the agriculture. It's also development of high value-added goods. I mean, Ukraine has very little of the, for example, car industry, or very little of the appliance industry, and it used to have huge car industry, huge appliance industry, and that's something where a new investor can step in and just develop many downstream things. So it's not only minerals. There are lots of downstream developments that can be done there. Look at our IT sector. It has been supporting the country even through this war, and many of our IT specialists, even though they may not be in Ukraine at the moment, but they're supporting the country by paying taxes and doing those service experts. So there are lots of opportunities in my view, and it's not only limited to the minerals.
Yuriy, what gives you the confidence to invest a further $200 million in your mining and production plants despite the ongoing war?
Well, we still believe that the war is going to end at some point. We're certain that Ukraine will play a vital role as part of the European economy. European economy, in a drive to decarbonization and to net zero, needs raw materials for its steel industry, and Ukraine is able, and Metinvest in particular, is able to provide that. European Union and the UK have been our home market for the last 15 years. It's been bigger than our Ukrainian market, and then we always considered it to be our home market. So we believe, truly believe, that once this war is over, we will be able to contribute a lot to both European and the British economies, and we will be able to become a key partner from that side. And we don't ask to sign any deals for that. We're ready to do it ourselves.
So you remain optimistic?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yuriy Ryzhenkov, thank you so much for fitting us in on your trip here to London.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about something completely different now. For many, the pressure to look good is difficult to balance with the pace of modern life. It means every little hack and help is highly valued, nowhere more so than in the world of hair. It's why even hairdryers and straighteners are turning to artificial intelligence. And it's the type of innovation that makes big money for the likes of British brand GHD, to the point where it's been highly sought after by private equity investors and is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I've been catching up with its chief executive. Jeroen Temmerman, welcome to the program. I wanted to begin by asking you first, what excites you most about your job and selling hair styling products?
We are now present in more than 30 countries around the world. We have been accelerating our net revenue with double digits in the last 5 years. And last but not least, we have been double investment in R&D in Cambridge. We have 100 of engineers in Cambridge, focused 100% of the transition of heat into hair. And when we say perfect styling and heat, we have stylers now that have algorithms in them that change 250 times per second to have the perfect heat styling of 185 degrees that gives perfect styling without heat damage.
You talk about quality. There are a lot of copycat products and fakes that bring competition to your product, perhaps made somewhere like China for a lot less. So how big a threat is that to your business?
For us, our main focus will be to drive our own business. We drive quality, we protect our brand, but for the rest, that is one of the things that we focus on, is purely on our own strength and our own product development.
I'm trying to get a sense from you of how big the threat is. So for example, when it comes to intellectual property, that's a big issue. When you look at the US-China trade war, should politicians be tackling those types of issues in the upcoming trade talks?
For me, is a government issue.
There are issues that the government deals with. But listening to businesses like yours, what are top of the list? What would you like them to be looking into to protect your industry and your products?
Just make sure that in the sense that when we produce our products, that we can protect them to patents and so on, that's what we do.
What can you tell us about how AI is reshaping your industry? How are AI chips being used in hairstyling products?
So artificial intelligence can work in all different ways, but one of the things that is very exciting, GHD DNA is to demonstrate and educate consumers around the world what products can do and what looks can look like. And we can tell them what kind of tool for GHD they should use to get that look. Whether that is a curler, whether that is a styler, whether that is a new category that we are developing from wet to dry.
Jeroen, one of the most frequent requests I get from my wife, other than to pick up fruit on the way home, is to check that her hair straighteners are unplugged once she's left the house. Is AI going to help me solve that?
Well, the battery technology is a completely different technology. I think that she's completely right asking you that question. we have a product that is already unplugged. The use, it's only 20 to 25 minutes. We think that the battery technology in the near future will develop so fast that we can give your wife a styler that even takes longer in terms of lasting battery to use a proper styling product.
That sounds like a very exciting innovation for our household. Jeroen Temmerman, CEO of GHD, thanks for joining us on the program.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That's all for this week. You can keep up to date with all the latest on the global economy on the BBC News website and smartphone app. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team. I'm on X at Mark Lobel. Until next time, keep well. Bye-bye.
Hello there. It was a